right. Welcome to the Men's Alliance podcast. Guys, I'm Josh Bufford, Sheepdog, and here very excited today to talk with Tyson Langhofer from the Alliance Defending Freedom. Tyson, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. Really excited.
Want to get a little bit of an introduction for you, and then we'll get started. You live in Virginia, I think from Wichita, Kansas. Is that right?
Right. That's
Went to
correct.
school in Virginia and worked in commercial litigation for 15 years.
That's right. Yep.
And now you are the senior counsel and director for the Center for Academic Freedom at ADF.
That's correct.
What did I miss? Tell me about your family.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I've been married 30 years. 30 years in June was my 30th anniversary to my high school sweetheart. We dated all through high school, met at church in Wichita, Kansas, and we have 5 kids from 27 to 17. So I've got one left at home, a 17-year-old. So we're close to transitioning to the scary time of empty nesters, but it's good. I'm super blessed. I've got an amazing family. I've got 5 siblings. Most of them live back in Kansas, and so really very, very blessed that with the family that God's given me.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on 30 years. That's outstanding.
Thanks. Yeah.
If you don't mind, can I open us in a word of prayer, and then we'll start talking about the topics at hand?
Yeah, would love it.
Excellent. Heavenly Father, we're grateful for this time. We're grateful for the freedom to gather, to speak, and to seek truth. We thank you for Tyson and the work that you've called him to with ADF, standing where culture and law and faith all collide. Lord, guide our conversation. Let it sharpen our men that are listening and challenge them and equip them to lead their families with wisdom and with boldness. Protect our speech from error and our hearts from pride. We ask you to guard our freedoms, especially the freedom to live out our faith without fear. Raise up men who'll stand and protect their homes and their families and their faith and be honoring to you. Use this time to advance your kingdom. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit, fill us in a little bit about your role at Alliance Defending Freedom. And I think for our guys, introduce Alliance Defending Freedom and the work that you guys do overall.
Yeah, absolutely. So ADF is the world's largest legal organization, which is committed to protecting religious freedom, free speech, the sanctity of life, marriage and family, and parental rights. So our mission is to keep the door open for the gospel by advancing every person's God-given right to live and speak the truth so that all might be free. And so we do that through 6 different, what we call centers. We have the Center for Academic Freedom, which is what I run. And the Center for Academic Freedom protects the free speech and free exercise rights of teachers and students and professors in K through 12 schools and public universities. Then we have the Center for Life, which is designed to protect life from conception to natural death. And then we have the Center for Christian Ministries, which protects religious and churches and parachurch organizations and their ability to live out their faith through their organizations. We have the Center for Parental Rights, which is self-evident. It protects the parental rights, and the Center for Free Speech. And then the Center for Conscience Initiatives, which protects business owners like Jack Phillips and others who are just seeking to live and work in their business consistent with their faith. And so we have a large organization, both nationally and internationally, who work every day to protect the core freedoms that our Constitution gives us.
Outstanding. Tribesmen, as you guys know, Men's Alliance is in the business of training men and supporting tribes, and we like to talk about that. Those are our 2 most important things. And when we train men, we are training them generally to speak with truth, to answer with truth, biblical truths and God's truths. And in order to be good ambassadors for Christ, we've got to find opportunities to do that. And so, as you can hear from Tyson's introduction, ADF is standing in places where we want to talk and we want to share God's truth, where there might be others who want to restrict that speech or otherwise have us hush up or not talk about those things. And so ADF is directly in line with our calling to answer and be Christ's ambassadors. So let's talk about the Center for Academic Freedom for the dads listening out there and the teachers that are listening out there. We've got a bunch of both. Where are the fights for speech and religious expression in K through 12 schools and on college campuses? Where are those happening the most right now, and why are those so critical for religious liberty?
Yeah, so the battle, as we see it, where for the ability to live and speak the truth, it is throughout the country. It is not on the coasts. It's not just in the blue states. It's everywhere in our public education institutions. And, we represent, teachers in rural Kansas, just like we represent teachers in Oregon, in Portland, in California, everywhere there is a battle for the truth. Why? Because we know that our battle is not against flesh and blood, right? It's against spiritualities and powers that are seeking to squelch the truth, that are seeking to stop good people from speaking. And so the battles throughout our educational institutions, and really where when you think about what are we fighting for right now? Well, what are the main truths that we see Satan trying to attack? The primary truth is the identity of God, the God-given identity that he's placed in each one of us, that we are male and female, right? The issue of gender and sexuality, it is the primary issue that my team has litigated over the last 5 years. Almost every battle that we've seen has been by the government or other individuals trying to stop people from simply speaking the basic truth that there is something known as a biological male and a biological female. And I mean, it's quite astonishing what I've seen in my time at ADF. That when I first joined, there was never even a thought in my mind that I would be in court having to litigate whether a teacher, and this is a true case that I have going on right now, can have a book in his class that says he is he. That the statement he is he, a school in Oregon has taken the position that is a hostile expression of animus towards those whose gender identity doesn't match their sex, and that you cannot promote a binary view of gender in public schools. That is what we're dealing with in public schools today. That's where the fight is. Why? Because if you can tell the next generation that their identity is rooted in what they believe about themselves or what somebody else tells them what they believe about themselves, rather than in the fact that they're created in the image of an all-powerful God who loves them and who has created them for a purpose, you can destroy the very foundation of the family, of the relationship between God and man, and between our government and truth.
That's where, that certainly resonates. Where are these? So in this particular case, where is the initial complaint coming from, and then who's bringing the heavy pressure in a case like that?
Yeah, so in this case, our client is a 17-year essentially social worker in the school who his whole role is just to help students who are struggling, to provide resources for them. So all he does is he has his own office and he evaluates students in that office to try to figure out what resources the school can provide him and or can provide the students. And another, he had placed in his office as decoration 2 books. One said he is he, one said she is she. That's all that was showing. He didn't use them in any of his work with the students. He just had them displayed. It had a cartoon boy and a girl, respectively, on the books. They were up for about 4 weeks, and another teacher mounted a complaint because she researched them, looked at what they said. And I mean, these books basically say, hey, it's great to be a boy. Hey, it's great to be a girl. Look, it's amazing, and celebrate being who you're created to be. That's all it says. She complained. Based on that one complaint, the school investigated and they found that there was that was a bias incident, a hostile expression of animus towards, those whose gender identity doesn't match their sex, and ordered him to remove those books. So the pressure primarily is coming from other teachers and administration. That's where we see a lot of this happening. But you also see it happening sometimes from parents who have their own agenda. I don't believe that the majority of people in public schools, either teachers or parents, actually believe this stuff, but it's the vocal minority that is forcing this on everybody else. And the real problem that I see, and we're talking about courage, there is a lack of courage in public school administration today. They are unwilling to say, to stand up for basic reality and basic biology. They know the truth. I don't think the majority of them believe the stuff they're saying or that other people are saying. They just don't have the courage to stand up. And I think one of the things that your listeners can do is tell their school administrators that they support them, that they believe in these things. What we're hearing is that the vocal minority is telling the administration what they believe, but the majority is being silent. They're not saying that. So there's no support for the administration. And they think, well, everybody must believe this other thing, when in fact, it's actually the opposite.
Sure. No, I think that's an important point. And, there are many layers that could bring pressure on your client. It could come from the state legislature. It could come from the governor's office, because certainly I presume that the Oregon State Legislature and the governor's office is supportive of affirming gender identity, however someone wants to express it. But it's interesting to recognize that it comes adjacent. It comes from the right and from the left, not always from the top down. And if people from the top down are not permitting speech to be expressed in free ways, then the crowd is going to shout down any expression of ideas that aren't popular in the moment.
100%. And one of the things that we say a lot at ADF is that courage begets courage. When somebody else sees an individual stand up, that gives them the courage to stand. And I've seen it time after time after time, where one person can really change the trajectory of a school district, of a state, of a congressional district. So it is really vital that everybody is willing to step in and to wade in and to talk about these difficult issues. They're difficult issues. There's no doubt about it. Are there potential consequences? Sure, there are potential consequences. No doubt. Some of my clients, they suffer consequences for speaking out. The problem is that the consequences that we are going to face if everyone remains silent are far greater than any individual consequence that we will have in any individual instance.
Sure. I want to come back to that in a moment about the consequences that can sometimes be expected. I heard from, related to this, I was talking with someone who works in the local Chesterfield School District here in Chesterfield, Virginia, and they were expressing some of the changes that are happening with regard to liberal thought and patrolling of speech here in our own local school district. Their perception was that the school board hasn't changed policy. The state of Virginia hasn't changed policy, and the school board hasn't changed policy. The school administrators, in most cases, haven't changed policy to alter the way that issues of sexuality or issues of other freedoms of the origin of Earth and of our species is being taught. It's every time you take out a teacher who's been teaching for 30 years and came from a different era, they're replaced by someone who's come through a university system that's indoctrinating in these new ways. And that new teacher is bringing in their own ideology. Why am I having a hard time with that? Bringing in their own thoughts and ideas. And that's where it's originating. It's coming in not as a top-down directive. It's coming in one at a time. You replace 10 teachers, you get 10 more liberal teachers, because who doesn't want to go to the education system? conservative kids. They don't want to go into education because it looks like they're going to get stones thrown at them.
There is, you are 100% correct. Where the vast majority of these actions are taking place, they are being pushed by a younger generation of teachers. Most of the older teachers, while they may not necessarily be Christians, or they may not even necessarily be conservative, but they are based in reality. And reality says that when you give students all of the power, you are going to create chaos. And that's exactly what these policies are doing. These policies, the policies that I challenge are primarily pronoun policies that say a student has the ability to change their name and pronoun at their will without any kind of administrative oversight at all. They can do it hour to hour, teacher to teacher, whenever they want, without any parental permission, without any request from other than they just say it. And if they say it, a teacher must do it. Any teacher who's taught at all, or anybody who has a basic understanding of human nature, would recognize this is a recipe for chaos. In a public school where you've got 30 students that you've got to teach by yourself, and you're telling me that this student now gets to disrupt things by saying, hey, that name on your roster, that's not mine. Here's what I want now. And everybody, you must do what I say, or I'm going to disrupt and get you in trouble. That's just not good administration, right? But that is what's happening. And it is coming from demands from a few teachers who are coming out of our universities, and these universities are teaching critical theory throughout. Critical theory designed to undermine the foundational pillars of Christianity, the foundational pillars of our country, of our constitutional republic. And so it affects everything, not just gender theory, but every aspect of education.
So then we also need to recognize that this turnover of the teaching staff is not complete. We're still in the process of turning over even some baby boomers and some older Gen Xers who are in there teaching in the schools, but they're all going to graduate out, and we just need to be concerned and vigilant about the stock of teachers that are coming back in and what they're bringing in to the classroom when they come.
That is a very real concern, 100%. And we have a few good schools who are turning out good teachers, but not nearly enough. And you're absolutely right that my son went to Patrick Henry College here in Virginia. They've got a great education program. Almost all of the school kids coming out of there are going to teach at classical Christian schools, right? They're starting their own. And that's great. We need those. 100% we need those. Those are so needed in our society. But the vast majority of kids are going to be educated in our public schools. Mm-hmm. And those kids are going to be voting citizens. And if they come out with a view of humans from a critical theory standpoint, that is a Marxist theory, which is completely antithetical to everything that our country has stood for. And it does not recognize individual rights that are recognized in our Constitution. It's all about power, and it's about creating division between our groups. And it's very divisive, and it is definitely something we need to be concerned about.
I want to go back, Tyson, if we can. You mentioned the consequences when someone like your client puts a book that says he is on the shelf. I perceive that sometimes you may encounter clients that are flabbergasted that they were doing this thing. They were a coach who's praying in public, or someone who's sharing their faith in a lunchroom, or someone who's displaying a book, and they're flabbergasted that actually got called out and they're in trouble for that. There are other cases where I do things where I think, yeah, this is going to be a little bit provocative. I'm trying to make a statement. I'm trying to make a statement about truth, but I fully expect, I shouldn't be surprised if someone takes offense or wants to have a conversation about it. What do you think is the ratio there?
It's a good question. I don't think it's probably as, I think it is probably a majority of my clients that I represent were surprised that they and were not intending to be provocative when they engaged in the speech that they did. And I'll give you an example. So I represented several years ago a client named Jack Denton, who was the president of the Student Senate at Florida State University, and this was in 2021 during a lot of the racial discussions going on, George Floyd and things like that. So a lot of unrest. But he's a Catholic. He was a member of the Catholic Student Union, the largest student group on campus. Very vocal Catholic. Everybody knew he was. He had been in the Senate for 2 years. He'd been elected by the Senate as the president. And he was in a private group chat of Catholic students, private group chat. And somebody put a link in there and said, hey, go watch this to the other members, this video. And the video, if you click a link, it will give money to these organizations. So Jack went and looked at it and he responded and said, hey, everybody, these organizations are fine organizations as far as I know, but just so you know, every one of them that you'll be supporting have anti-Catholic views. And somebody said, well, what do you mean? And so he explained the ACLU supports abortion, and the Black Lives Matter supports transgenderism. And so these are anti-Catholic views. He said, I want us all to know the truth. That's what he said. That very night, that private group chat was leaked to a member of the Student Senate, and they held a vote to remove him as Senate president because he had a private group chat. He encouraged his fellow Catholics to not support organizations that have anti-Catholic views, right? Not intending to be provocative, not even with his own people. He was just saying, hey, I want you to know the truth. So that is the much more common type of situation is my clients are simply trying to live out their faith. And they're then targeted for doing so. Obviously, there are times where some of my clients have taken a stand and said, this is probably going to ruffle some feathers, but I have to do it. But the vast majority are just trying to go about their lives. They don't want a fight. The fight was brought to them. They just decided they're going to be faithful and not back down when the fight was brought to them.
Good. Can we talk about, while we're talking about classrooms, can we talk about homeschool classrooms for a minute? My family we're homeschooling our two children. I've got a 7 and a 10-year-old, and we're in our 3rd year, and it's been amazing. This past year, the Virginia State Legislature, I don't know if you're familiar, but there were some attempts to remove the religious exemption, which is traditionally Virginia has very friendly laws and regulations for homeschoolers. That was kind of a first weather balloon test. Governor Youngkin threatened to veto that law if it were passed. He protected us from a lot of things in the last 4 years. And can you talk a little bit about the attack on homeschooling as it relates to these same speech issues?
Yeah, that's it's a very real attack, and it's frankly a quite an amazing story of what the homeschooling protections and traditions is relatively recent. And Mike Ferris, the former president of ADF, he started Homeschool Legal Defense Association about 40 years ago. And he testifies at the time when he started it, if you asked every attorney general of any state, they would have said that homeschooling was not legal, that you could not, the wholesale homeschooling, you could not just homeschool your kids if you wanted to.
Wow.
That was the state 40 years ago. Today, every state protects, even the most liberal, protects the right to homeschool. Now, there are varying, oversights and things like that, and some states are more friendly than others, but every state does that. And so I tell that story because it's an amazing story of two men who started Homeschool Legal Defense, and they said, we're going to protect this. And within one generation, every state now protects that really vital right. But it is back under attack now. And there are a lot of people, especially in the education movement, recognize that they want to undermine parents' rights to educate their children, especially religious parents who believe that, their rights come from God, not from the government, and who believe that those rights are inalienable. And they know that if we can educate our children in that, they're going to be a lot harder to indoctrinate and change. They're going to be a lot harder to get, some of these bad ideas into them. And so, it absolutely is something that we need to make sure that the people who gave their life's work to protect homeschool, we need, as this next generation comes up, we need to continue those protections, because they are coming for those protections. If you look at Germany, homeschooling is outlawed in Germany. Why? Because they said, we don't want, individual sects, right? Sects of religion or beliefs to be able to, to so-called, raise their kids up with these different beliefs. And essentially that's what we hear here, is where these people are saying, we don't want individuals to be able to raise their children consistent with their beliefs. We think the government or broader society should decide what children believe about the important things about gender, about sex, about religion, about God, about rights.
Hey, men. Thrivent is proud to support Men's Alliance's goals, and financial advisor Dr. Andrew Newman, call sign Sage, is excited to help tribe members and those they care about make financial choices guided by their Christian values. Faith is what fuels Andrew. Does it fuel you too? Call Andrew today at 612-246-0725 so you can take care of yourself and those you care about, including your local tribe and Men's Alliance.
Yeah, and that it gets back to the idea of whose children are they? Are they the state's children? Are we the citizens in captivity, or are we free to raise our children that God gave us? I also think in Virginia there's a collision between restricted speech. There are things that as homeschoolers I'm teaching my kids that the state really prefers me not to say, or individuals that prefer me not to say, for them not to know. And then there are issues of compelled speech. There are things that they want to make sure that I'm indoctrinating my kids about that in our home we're not doing. And so I think it comes from both angles for parents to consider. There not only are things you might choose, that there are things that are happening in the public school that you don't want your children exposed to, but there are also just as many things that the public schooling system is hoping to make sure your kids hear and learn and absorb, that we're protecting from them. And so it comes from both sides.
It 100% does. And I'll just give you a little bit of background of ours. We have 5 kids, and we lived in Kansas at the time when my kids were born, and they had good public schools there when they went to Mays Public Schools, and we sent them there. We had no problem with them. We had great teachers. We enjoyed them. But we decided to pull them out when my oldest daughter went into middle school, not because of anything ideologically. My wife was mostly like, I want to spend more time with our kids, and I just don't like how long they're away and so forth. And so we decided to do that. And so my 2 oldest have graduated from public schools, although they were homeschooled for a portion of their time as well. But over the last 10 years, I have seen a radical shift in how education is being done in our public schools. And I think at the time when we were educating our kids, we had the ability to kind of push back on the majority of the bad ideas that were in school, and we could really discuss those. And I think we had the ability to, really kind of insulate my kids from many of the bad ideas. Today, the way that it's happening, it's not isolated to a single class or single area of study. This critical theory has embedded itself throughout the curriculum. And in fact, it's intentional, because if you look at the Mahmood case, they said, we can't opt you out of this because it's everywhere. It is entirely throughout our curriculum, gender identity ideology, from the youngest age of kindergarten all the way up to high school biology. That's everywhere, and we can't do it. It's intentional, designed to get around parental rights laws, which give you the right to opt out, right? It used to be just sex ed. You can opt them out of sex ed, do it yourself. Can't do that anymore. And so I do think that dads need to be aware that, I don't care if you're in rural Mississippi or if you're in New York City, this ideology has crept in, and you need to know what your kids are being taught, because likely that some of the fundamental beliefs about men and women, about marriage, about life, about God, they are being undermined actively in classes that you would have no idea, and at a much younger age than what you really had ever imagined coming from my generation.
And it's not just, you may be in a school system where you have a teacher that's a Christian, and you have a school administrator, you've got a principal that's a Christian, and you're in a rural area. But it's such a good point, Tyson, that the people who are choosing to purchase the curricula and who are choosing to purchase the standardized tests, when it comes in the book, and it comes in the videos and the online forums, and it shows up as things that are being tested on, that you can't be protected by a single teacher or by a single school administrator who shares your worldview, because it's coming in from multiple places.
100%. And frankly, I've looked at this issue a lot to say, like, how did this get in here? And really, you can have a conservative school board with even conservative administration that didn't really fully understand what the curriculum they were adopting in some ways. And the reason why is because there's a ton of outside organizations who have crafted free curriculum and said, hey, do you want some books to read? Hey, we'll give you all these books. Hey, we've got this great curriculum. And schools are strapped for money. They're like, that's amazing. These resources are coming in. They don't vet them all because there's thousands of books or whatever it is. They come in, and then a parent pulls that off the shelf, and the school board's like, how did that get there? Right? They didn't even know many times what's happening, because you have these outside advocacy organizations who are coming in with the intentionality of trying to push their ideology, their radical ideology, on the next generation of children. And it can come in even with a good school board, even with the good school teachers. And so it's our role as dads, as fathers, to understand what's going on, and we need to get involved. We cannot abdicate that role to public schools. And frankly, we can't even do it to private Christian schools. I have talked to more private Christian schools who have had exactly what you said, that these young teachers come in and they start pushing this radical ideology, and they have created a huge firestorm with long-standing, wonderful 70, 80-year Christian schools who are now embroiled in all of these, cultural battles solely from one or two teachers coming in trying to, push this new ideology that they've learned at the public universities.
Yeah. A story from our family. We went up to visit the Museum of the Bible last year, and we're going through early American history with the kids. And so we go and we do our day there and spend the night. And then we're going over and we're picking out some of the museums, of the Smithsonian museums, to go and visit. And we've got to be really, really paying attention to everything. We go into the Natural History Museum, and you kind of know when you go into the Natural History Museum what you're likely to encounter, especially coming out of an administration that was placing things there that they wanted to make sure my kids were learning that are not biblically based. But even when you go to the Museum of American History, which I think we're going to go see, let's go see the Declaration of Independence. Let's go see these old documents and talk about those. Through every turn, every kiosk and every sign, there are you have to be watching carefully, because there are small bits of this critical race theory and these they've just been infused. And I know that the current administration I think there's been some noise about pulling some of the displays and some of the exhibits from the Smithsonian right now, but it happens everywhere.
It does. And it's why that it's critical for us as fathers. We cannot turn a blind eye to what's going on in the culture. We have to know that there are forces, whether it be the government, whether it be social media, whether it be public advocacy organizations, other people, they are seeking to educate our children on the most important topics of the day. And they are doing it every day. And if we are not actively educating our children on those topics, they are learning the wrong lesson. And it is going to, and you're going to wake up one day and you're like, how did my child end up with these beliefs growing up in my household? Because you just thought they were somehow going to, absorb them from you somehow, because you're in the house, right? They're not. And you must actively talk about these issues.
That's excellent. So let's talk again about ADF. Let's circle back to ADF covers a lot of ground. You shared the different pillars and areas that you guys focus. How does ADF choose cases?
Yeah, so we look at our mission. We're that all men might be free, right? We're keeping the doors open for the gospel. So that's the broad mission, and then we okay, what are the pillars that create freedom? And we have those pillars: life and marriage and family and religious freedom and free speech and parental rights, right? And then the ability to do things through our ministries. And so each one then says, okay, well, those are our pillars, and then each center, has the ability to say, let's figure out where are the pressures, where are the pressure points that are trying to undermine these key freedoms. And so each that center then decides, okay, here's our goals, and so then we measure the cases that come in. We analyze them through that lens. So I'll take mine. My goal is to protect the marketplace of ideas in the public education system, whether it be K through 12 or the public universities. And that means generally, most of the time, my clients are censored because of their religious beliefs, because of their conservative beliefs. And so then we look at the cases coming in and say, okay, how is that being done? And then what are the precedent we need to set in order to protect that specific freedom? Or what if we already have a precedent set, where do we need to, push back on the various ways that they're undermining this precedent? And so I'll give you one example. I mean, we have a number of, we represent a lot of conservative and religious student organizations of public university campuses. And the public universities, they don't like, even though they have this forum for these, student groups, some of them have over 1,000 student groups. They don't really like student groups that hold to a biblically orthodox worldview and that want their leaders to adhere to those. And so there's a lot of universities who try to tell religious Christian groups that you cannot require your leaders to sign your statement of faith. That somehow violates our non-discrimination policy, right? And that's a key protection of the freedom of association in the First Amendment, the ability to associate with people who hold similar beliefs. And so we regularly protect student groups like Ratio Christi, who's a Christian apologetics organization on campus, whose leaders educate their students on Christian apologetics, but they're being told they can't sign a statement of faith. So that's a key component of what we're trying to do, is to make sure that Christian student groups on campus are being protected. And to the extent that cases come in that, where that right is not being protected, we will take those cases and try to protect those rights of those student organizations.
That's interesting. This past week, I was on a call. Through our levels of training, we have some guys who they go and they earn their Men's Alliance patch. And that means that they have been taught some advanced leadership skills and some apologetic skills. And they've gone through kind of an intensive training for about 10 weeks. And if they meet all the qualifications, they earn their Men's Alliance patch. And after that, we ask them how they want to deploy. You don't train to hang out. You train to go deploy and go take those skills and do something with them. One guy in particular, we just came back from Texas where we had a little over 70 guys earn their patch. And one guy said, and I hadn't heard this before, he said, it's my mission to get a Men's Alliance tribe on the campus at LSU in Baton Rouge. I'm going back to Baton Rouge. I'm going to go find some guys, and I'm going to start a tribe there. Now, a tribe leader to lead a Men's Alliance tribe has got to sign our statement of faith. They've got to agree with that. What other things could you imagine that maybe we'll go ahead and give him some tips if he was going to go and start a Men's Alliance tribe, based on what you know of our organization, that he's likely to run into hurdles doing that on a college campus?
Yeah, so the one of the primary ways that they try to keep conservative and Christian student organizations off is their non-discrimination policy. And the federal government, when they give federal funds to public university, any institution that accepts federal funds, has to adopt a non-discrimination policy that says that the university doesn't discriminate on certain bases: race, religion, sex, I think national origin and military veteran status, something like that. That's what's required. Then they add a bunch of things like gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, things like that. That's not required by the federal government. But they use that then to say, well, we can't recognize a group like Men's Alliance if Men's Alliance requires its leaders to sign a statement of faith, which might exclude those who don't hold the Christian views or hold other views that the Men's Alliance requires. So let's say that you put in there that we believe that sex is biological, that it's immutable, right? If you believe sex is immutable, they could say, well, that's a violation of our non-discrimination policy on gender identity because you are somehow, discriminating against those who don't have gender identity. Now, I don't agree with that. That's not discriminatory. But even if it was, do you have the right to require those leaders? So that's one thing. Another would be, let's say that he gets it started. They actually recognize them. And he wants to bring in a speaker. Say he wants to bring me in, right? And they're like, then you get protests. Oh, Tyson works for Alliance Defending Freedom. We don't like Alliance Defending Freedom. And we don't want him to come speak here. So they get protests. And so then the school cancels the speech because they say, oh, it's going to cause some security concerns because other people are going to riot, and we do that a lot. So that's a big one as well, is when they try to hold events, they have all kinds of hurdles they have to cross that others don't, like security fees. They're saying you got to pay for security because other people are going to violently react to your speech. Now your speech is more expensive. Or we're not going to let you speak in the middle of campus like everybody else can because it's going to be disruptive. You need to go to the side of campus, way over there where nobody wants to go. All kinds of things like that. Many times it's death by 1,000 cuts with public universities and Christian and conservative student organizations.
I guess we Men's Alliance is open to all biological men, and so I assume that there might even be an issue there because it would be a group that would be targeted only to biological men on campus.
Yeah, that's correct. They would claim that that's a violation. What's interesting though, and they're not ever consistent, right? Because they have fraternities and sororities on campus, and many of those have similar things. They're also not consistent because there are women organizations that only allow women, right? Or there are the Black Student Union, right? So they allow all these exceptions. They just apply they apply the rule when they want to apply it, and they don't apply it when they don't want to apply it, and that's not constitutional. And the good news is, just so you know, we win all of these cases. I mean, these cases that it is unconstitutional, when they impose something like you can't require leaders to have a statement of faith. That is very clear that you can require leaders to adhere to a statement of faith for a religious organization. That's very clear. That's protected associational rights. And so if you run into these problems on campus, give us a call. We can help you navigate the situation. And we have had a lot of success doing so. Unfortunately, even though the law has been established for a long time, they still keep doing it, and they just hope that these groups don't know their rights or aren't willing to stick up for their rights.
And this gets back to the chilling effect of you would then what ultimately happens is, sure, you're going to win, but at what cost, and at what personal cost, and what financial cost, and what cost to your time and your attention. And so this gets back to many organizations choosing not to even try to engage on a university campus, and effectively ceding that ground to the ones who would prefer for us not to be there, and maybe saying, well, we'll just go up the street, we'll go to a church grounds 10 blocks away, and we'll just do it over there instead of doing it on the university campus. But we're giving up that ground. We're saying we're no longer going to fight for our religious freedoms in this area. And how do you advise clients, or how would you advise our tribesmen to consider when is it the right time to go ahead and press in, and when is the right time just to take a tack to the right or left and continue on with your mission in an adjacent space?
Yeah, that's a tough one. There's no one size fits all answer for that, because there are sometimes, sometimes discretion is the better part of valor. Right. You gotta be wise in that. And that doesn't mean every time you're going to fight. But, in the situations where we're talking about a university opening up a space for students to open up organizations to advance certain ideas or beliefs, it is vital that Christian and conservative organizations actively participate in that. Not only because there are students there that need that community, but also because the broader secular community needs to understand that there are people who hold these views. And I'll give you an example. One of the things I say a lot is that uniformity of thought breeds intolerance of disagreement. We wonder why are university systems so hostile to people who hold biblically orthodox views? Not because they aren't present there. It's because we're not speaking them there. When they hear that there are more people who hold those views, it doesn't seem so strange and they don't react so violently. But when they hear them so rarely, right? They're like, I had no idea anybody ever believed that, right? This is crazy to me, right? And so you saw that with the Trump election back in 2016. Why? Because nobody was saying, I'm voting for him, right? And so when it happened, they were like, what in the world? We had no idea, right? We had no idea that there was so much support. And so the universities reacted very violently because nobody was saying, hey, I might support him. Now, and so my point primarily is that we have to be there because we need to provide community for those that are there that hold our views, but also to be expressing these ideas, which the vast majority of Americans believe, but they're not being spoken in many of these elite circles. And so the elites are just unaware of how many people have these beliefs. And that's why we have such a divide between, kind of the elites and everybody else of common middle America.
Mm-hmm. That is a common theme with our tribesmen is you'll have guys who have a belief, a deeply held belief about biblical principles, and they don't speak up because they don't feel equipped and they don't feel confident. They don't want to look stupid. We're guys. I don't want to look dumb in front of my friends. And when someone says something that's untrue, or when they represent a perspective that I don't agree with, I've got to have a certain level of confidence that I can represent my view articulately, or else I'm going to look stupid, and then I'm more likely to stay quiet. And so, I would encourage all of you guys out there getting the training and getting the practice in, will enable you when those things happen to actually speak up and to do it in the spirit of 1 Peter 3:15, to do it with gentleness and respect, but to firmly advocate for the position that we hold.
That is 100% accurate. We cannot go into a situation. We're basically going into battle with nothing on, no weapon, nothing, and we're just like, oh, I can just speak the truth, right? That's not the way it's going to work. You're not going to be effective if you've not trained yourself. These issues are very complicated and very difficult to understand where the other side's coming from and what their perspective is. So we need to read. We need to educate. When you look at how did our founders come up with the documents they did? They were so well read. They understood history. They understood philosophy. They understood the Bible. And that's how they were able to do this. And we need to be the same types of men who don't go in unprepared. We understand the arguments and we can do it. And you're absolutely right. At ADF, we say we need to sing the song sweetly. We need to be winsome, right? We need to sing the song sweetly. We're not coming in there to beat people over the head, right? They're being deceived. It's a spiritual battle. So we need to understand that. We need to have empathy. We need to have grace. We need to recognize that this person probably has a family member or might be struggling with these things themselves. And God loves them and he desires good for them, and we know that when you live consistently with the truth, it's better for them. So we want to do it out of love, not out of anger, right? Out of love for them to know the truth, because we know it's going to be better when they're able to live consistently with the truth.
Yeah, amen to that. Can we talk about workplaces? I know this is not in your current area of responsibility, but a lot of our guys are in a workplace where they're also hearing things being said, corporate policies. Anybody who's working at, I was just talking with a guy this morning who's working at a large bank. What are the same kinds of challenges, and what are the freedoms and protections that exist for workers who feel like they need to speak up or that they want to share their faith in a workplace?
Yeah, so there's a number of both state and federal laws that protect that prohibit employers from discriminating against people based on their religion, and that would include expressing their religious beliefs. Now, if you work for a private employer, the First Amendment does not protect you. It does not prohibit a private employer in general from terminating you because of what you said. Right? The First Amendment only restricts the government. It restricts the government from discriminating against you or punishing you because of your speech, from censoring you or compelling you to say something. It does not prohibit a private employer from doing so. Now, that being said, there are some state laws that prohibit certain types of discrimination, religious discrimination, and there's Title VII, a federal law, which does the same. So if you are expressing a religious belief about something, you have the right to do that without fearing retribution from your employer. Now, that being said, obviously, you still need to be wise about that. The workplace isn't designed for you're not being paid to proselytize, right? Your fellow employees. At the same time, when you're in the lunchroom and they're having a discussion about men and women's sports, do you have the right to express your opinion on that? 100% you do. And should you? 100% you should, in the right way, right? With the right tone, with the right education. But that's the type of thing that we cannot have fear about. And why? Because courage begets courage. I guarantee you there are other people there who also share the same opinion, who are going to be willing to speak up as well, if you're willing to wade in initially and give that opinion. But you have protection. Most employers will also have policies which prohibit that type of discrimination. They also have policies which protect your right to express yourself many times because they want to give you that freedom. And so you'll also have potential policy protection. And if you're a union member, maybe you have union protections as well. So there are a lot of protections for employees, and it is important that we're salt and light in our places of employment. And I've seen many people have real impact on their workplace because they were willing to stand up and to express their faith or encourage people in certain ways. But the vast majority of the time, I would say you're going to do it by developing relationship. Right? You're going to do it by developing relationship with people who know you. And then when they run into a problem, you can speak into their life because they've seen you live consistently. They've seen that you're a man of integrity. They see that you're a man who cares about others. And when you do that well, you're going to have the ability to have an exponential impact. God, the Holy Spirit is going to open up opportunities for you to share your faith because you've been faithful every day serving people around you. Not because you've been thumping them over the head with the Bible, but because you've been a faithful presence of serving those in your community, serving those at your workplace.
That's right. And our guys will talk to a pastor guy. He can tell you story after story about after getting some training and after pursuing to be able to represent better the hope that we have, that opportunities tend to just start falling into your lap. And so being prepared is so important. To that end, Tyson, for some of these cultural issues, what are some resources that guys could go to if they say, man, I feel like my family is undereducated or underprepared to be able to answer truthfully and using evidence for these topics? What are some resources that you would point us to go to so that we can get better educated and prepared?
Sure. There's a lot of great, thankfully, resources that have been prepared. One of them is a book called When Harry Became Sally by Ryan Anderson, which talks about the gender ideology and it provides a religious, philosophical, kind of educational, deep dive into the issue of gender ideology. There's one called Irreversible Damage by Abigail Schreier, which talks about the social contagion that has taken over our young girls and how gender ideology has infused itself there. Those are two really important ones. What is Marriage by Ryan Anderson, also on what is marriage? Like, why is marriage solely between a man and a woman? And understanding that these foundational, principles, some of the things that have been been attacked, that were taken for granted for thousands of years are now under attack. And so understanding the philosophical and religious underpinnings of some of our basic notions, that's really important. I think Fault Lines by Vodi Bakum about critical theory and critical race theory is a very good book on that as well, because again, it shows it will help you relate to what your children's view on race, right? My children view race and race issues very differently than what I viewed them. And because they're being taught and talked about in a very different way. And I think Fault Lines provides a really good insight into the ideology that underlies that, so it can help you have language to talk about these issues with your children. So those are some kind of broader topics.
Do you have anything? Yeah, I've got a personal bias against the term free speech. I think I hear the term free speech and I think, don't you mean speech?
Yeah.
Because there's speech, which is protected, and then there is restricted speech and there's compelled speech, which I want as little of as possible. And so I think it's. But using the parlance that we currently have, is there anything related to speaking freely or your protection of free speech, a tool that or a resource that you can point to?
It's a good question. Let's see. So there's a recent book by Jonathan Turley. I think it's called The Indispensable Right. And it's really good. He's a professor at George Washington University. A really, really good overview of free speech and our free speech protections. Because you're absolutely right. The First Amendment is unique throughout history and unique throughout the world. There is no other country that even comes close to the protections that we have. America is the last and only bastion of free speech. You can look at Western democracies that we consider our sisters countries. They are not even close to what we have. And our protections are foreign to everybody else, because everybody else starts from we'll restrict these things and then here's what's free. We start from everything's free and we're going to restrict a few very narrow exceptions. You think about this issue of hate speech we hear all the time. There is no hate speech exception to the First Amendment. It doesn't exist, right? Why? Is there hateful speech? Sure. As a parent, I tell my children, don't say that. That's hateful, because we are supposed to speak in love as Christians. But the government saying what's hateful and saying you can't say that is very different than me as a parent saying we should not take that tone or we should not say that thing, right? And so we've got very limited exceptions, and hate speech is not one of them. Why? Because there is no definition of hate speech. It's impossible to define hate speech. Another topic I just thought about that I think if you want to read a great book on this, it's called Censorship, and it's by Paul Coleman, who directs our ADF international team. And what it does is it goes through all of the hate speech laws in Europe, and it shows how bad it is when governments try to define what is off limits. What most people don't know today, in the UK right now, there are 30 arrests a day for social media posts. 30 arrests a day in the UK for social media posts. There's over 3,000 people in jail in the UK for social media posts today. That is a very scary thing. That is a country that we would consider a Western democracy, right? But yet they are using their police force to knock on people's door and say, did you post this? Right? And these aren't talking about threats. We're not talking about threats, right? A true threat in America is prohibited. It's not protected. So if I make a threat, a violent threat, that's not protected. And you should be prosecuted for violently threatening somebody else. But that's very different than saying, hey, I believe that a male is a male, or that sex is immutable. That's what's being prosecuted.
We even need to be watching. We shouldn't live in fear. One of my favorite books is Live Not by Lies, as it relates to speaking freely, and I recommend everybody to read that. But even if you look at visa applications for those who want to travel to the EU right now, there are new provisions that are being introduced related to people who espouse hateful or dangerous views. And as a traveler, we just have to be aware that some of the things that we are still free to say here in the United States are things that would be great offense taken to when we're visiting folks in other countries.
Yeah, absolutely. There's right. I mean, one of our big efforts is the Digital Services Act. In the EU, it is an existential threat to everybody that lives in those areas. And then because it regulates the internet, it is an existential threat to our speech, because the speech that we put on X is being censored, over there because of that. Right. And so yeah, absolutely. It is something that we cannot allow this type of censorship to happen. We saw it during COVID when the government tried to censor, real discussion about what is the most medically effective, treatments. What should we be doing? Right? They try to put their foot on the scale because of control, and that we cannot allow that to happen. Now, that does allow a lot of speech that we don't like. As a parent, there's a lot of speech on the internet I don't like and I don't want my children exposed to. 100%. I don't doubt it, and I don't dispute that speech doesn't have a lot of value many times. But if we try to restrict the speech that we determine is invaluable,
that's right.
Right,
we've got to be so careful with that.
It 100%. And one of the what people, I'll just give you one more example because it's really interesting. The EU is a very secular society. Most of those Western democracies are very secular, right? But they all have blasphemy laws in a secular society. Like they're mad that you're going to speak out against a religion or a God that doesn't exist, right? It doesn't make any sense, but they all have that, right? And so they are regulating, discussion on really important topics, right? The most important topics about who we are as humans, about, how we relate to God. Is there a God, right? Those things are being regulated in other countries. We cannot allow that to happen here in America. We have to maintain a robust First Amendment, or every other right goes with it. These fundamental freedoms, they travel together. You will see no country that protects freedom of speech, but not freedom of religion, but protects freedom of religion and not freedom of speech. They travel hand in hand. So even if you're a secular person, you need to protect the freedom of religion, because it will come for your free speech if they take away my right to live consistent with my religious beliefs.
And that means that we've got to be careful not to get revenge when we have power, and to stifle speech, even speech that we don't like. And remind us, the ACLU defended Nazis in Skokie, Illinois. This was a generation and a half ago that this occurred, right?
Absolutely. There was and we're not talking about like theoretical Nazis. They were literally Nazis.
Real Nazis.
Nazing under a Nazi banner in a Jewish neighborhood, and Jewish attorneys at the ACLU defended their rights. Why? Not because they agreed with their speech. They hated their speech. They abhorred their speech, but they recognized that if they didn't have the right to march down a street expressing their admittedly hateful opinion, that the next speech would be their speech potentially. And so you're absolutely right. This is a time where we feel like we need to get revenge, where we feel like we need to use the power that we've had to advance our agenda and shut down our ideological opponents. That is not the solution. It has never been the solution. It can't be. It feels good in the moment. It might be expedient in the moment, but in the long run, it's going to be bad. It's not going to be effective. It's not going to give our kids the types of freedoms that we want them to have. That we need to protect the rights of all Americans to live consistently with the truth. And that might mean allowing them to say things that we disagree with. But we have to believe that, that truth will ultimately prevail, and that God will use even, that type of, conduct or speech to, advance his ends.
And we know that truth will prevail. It's just a matter of how time. Can you give us, Tyson, as we kind of start to wrap up, are there one or two things that that Christian fathers and husbands should be watching in particular? The population of our tribesmen are much larger in Virginia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Texas, but we're growing nationwide. I think 42 states or 43 states as of this month. Are there a couple of issues that you would encourage our guys to stay to keep a close pulse on, and ways that they could support your work in defending against those?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about a lot of them. I mean, I think the one of the issues of our day is gender identity, and recognizing that the identity of our children are under attack. So as a father, I think one of the most important things you can do as a father is root their identity in the fact that they're created in the image of God, and recognize and continue to repeat that refrain for them, and make them help them understand, that it doesn't matter what other people tell them. Their identity is in being a child of God. And so that issue of identity is really, really important. I think also as fathers of boys, I think that the role of the man is really under attack in our culture. Our boys are rootless. They are visionless, because they've been told that they're, that the desires they have inside of them are wrong, and that society no longer has any use for them. So I think helping our boys understand who they are as boys is also really, really important. So that issue of identity is really important. But also this issue of truth, and recognizing that what, as Jesus said, sometimes the truth will be offensive, and we cannot avoid today. If we're not running into some resistance, we are likely not doing our job right. That's right. Just the bottom line. And I hate that, because even though I'm an attorney and I'm in conflict for a living, I don't like conflict. I don't like people not to like me. That's kind of my personality. And I kind of thought when I was younger, I thought, well, Jesus, like, he was the most loving man in history, right? Like, if I live like him, everybody's going to love me. That was, I knew that it wasn't true, but I kind of I lived like that. But the more I lived, the more I realized, look, we're going to be weird. As a society, live consistently with Jesus, it's going to look weird, and it's going to encounter some resistance, but we have to be willing to do that. And we need to tell our children to expect that they can't just expect to skate through life without some resistance, if we're going to live consistently with the truth.
That's good. Last thing, Tyson, you said your 17-year-old is a son. Is that right?
Right.
All right. What do I need to do? If I come pick you up, can I get you guys to go and visit a tribe? Go meet our guys around a fire?
I would love that. You name the time and place, and we'll do it.
Yeah, let me get you guys connected. I'd love for you to go and visit a tribe and see what's happening on the ground at the individual tribe level. And I think it's something that I know you would open your eyes a little bit to what we're doing at that level, and the band of brothers that's being built in nearly 400 places around the world right now. So.
Well, I love what you're doing. I love your mission. I'm so thankful that you have an organization like you. I mean, we're called Alliance Defending Freedom. We know there's an alliance. We are one very small part of that. We're trying to put our fingers in the dikes of the legal things, and you're building the culture. And we have to build the culture. The law is very limited, but what you can do through the culture and through the men every day out there in society, their work is just as important as anything we're doing in the courtrooms.
Yes. Well, hey, thank you. Is there any questions you got for us before we wrap it up?
No, I don't think so. I think, just keep doing what you're doing. Keep encouraging your men. Keep, encouraging them to be courageous and go out in society and be the salt and light. And call us if you have any problems. We're going to be there, have your back.
We'll do that. Thank you, Tyson. Have a great day.
Thank you.
To find out more about what we are doing in Men's Alliance, go to men'salliancetribe.com. This will help you find a tribe near you. We have grown so much over the past few years. There are thousands of tribesmen all over the country in hundreds of tribes. We're growing every single week. Go to men'salliancetribe.com, find a tribe near you, or maybe you're the man to start one in your area.